distinguished guests, board members, dear colleagues and friends. Bonjour u merħba ġewwa Malta. Good morning and welcome to Malta. It is with great honor and pleasure to welcome you to the 77th board meeting of the European Students' Union. On any other day, I also myself would have started in a similar manner as William would have started and told you, welcome home. But I feel like right now, this is not the Malta I am usually so proud to call home. You are here during, as William said, some of the most turbulent political times. And I feel like, as some of you have asked me about my status where I wrote, my country is no longer a democracy, I want to assure you that I was not exaggerating at that moment. I do believe that a country reaches rock bottom whenever it stops listening to its people and whenever it stops acting in the best interest of the people. Just yesterday, the Prime Minister of Malta has announced his resignation with effect from January. And whilst this is not the ideal situation, it is a first win for democracy, and it is a first win for the people who have spoken out. Before delving a bit more into giving you a bit of a thorough run-through of what I think about what is happening in my own home country, Malta, I'd like to start off by first and foremost thanking Kunsill Studenti Universitarji, KSU, for their huge efforts and investments in hosting this board meeting. As most of you know, this is the second time in 2 years that KSU is hosting a board meeting for ESU. And they did so this time because no other union could host the board meeting at such a short notice. Let me sincerely extend my words of thanks, not only to the organizing committee, who are clearly doing an excellent job, but to the entire executive committee of KSU, and please join me once again to give them a round of applause. As rightly pointed out before, you've heard that the theme chosen for this seminar is Solidarity and Human Rights in Higher Education, the role of student organizations in safeguarding inclusive societies. And I have to admit that when I was first approached with this title, I did not know, and the political situation in Malta was not what it is right now. But I do believe that everything happens for a reason, and I do believe that the relation between the title of this seminar and what is going at the moment is extremely relevant. Human rights in Malta have been brutally violated. A journalist was brutally blown up for unveiling the truth about politicians and people in power. And yet, the Maltese parliament and the Maltese government remain led by corrupt crooks who, despite having blood on their hands, decided to cling on to power. Luckily, KSU, the full member of the European Students' Union, have been very direct in their approach. And I cannot but applaud you for having the guts to speak up, for mobilizing students, and for actually ensuring that people who are meant to shoulder the responsibility actually do so. But we need more than this. We need to stand up, and we need to make sure that we stand up to be counted. We need to continue showing parliamentarians that no one is dumb or stupid, and that there's nothing that our generation wants more than clean and honest politics. What is happening here at the moment is nothing but an example of what uncontrolled power and lack of separation of power can actually lead to. I sincerely hope that those of you in this room who will soon, and for sure certainly, end up in your national politics, will one day look back to this day and remember that corruption and dirty politics will lead to nothing fruitful, and that you were in Malta to experience this firsthand, and therefore you understand why justice needs to not only be done, but needs to always be seen to be done. Now, back to our ESU internal affairs. As we will be discussing a new policy paper on the social dimension, I do encourage you to take a look around you. Whilst our proposed policy paper highlights what we envisage as being ideal in order to improve the diversity of higher education, I'd like to remind us all that good practices should begin at home. I'd like you to every now and then analyze how, whilst we are advocating for the absolute right things, we are still definitely doing something fundamentally wrong internally. Maybe some of you will not like my next line, but most of us in this room are still privileged white people And this needs to change if we actually want our organization to grow. We need to ensure that the inclusive practices we advocate so hard for start being implemented within our organization and start being implemented within all your member unions. With that being said, we are extremely proud and happy that ESU will finally and soon have a policy paper that moves beyond the social dimension as a concept of its own and will start looking at the bigger picture within the higher education. Secondly, we are also extremely happy to be discussing two crucial statements, one on the future of Bologna and one on the topic of sustainability. Two issues which are currently of utmost importance at the European agenda. As we prepare ourselves for another ministerial conference in June, it is important to have a vision that connects the work of the Bologna process with the life of our members. ESU has over the past year and a half been an instrumental partner in the Bologna process, and we hope that with the adoption of this statement, we'll be able to back up our position in order to continue ensuring that the Bologna process remains as relevant, as useful as ever for our members. It is important to understand also the importance of sustainability and make sure that we put this at the top of the agendas of each of our respective countries. We are currently facing a climate crisis, and this cannot be ignored or pushed back any further. It is our time to act, and it is our time to start leading by example in this regard. And speaking of leading by example, during this board meeting, we will be reviewing, possibly substantially, our standing orders, and therefore our structures. I'd therefore only like to make one remark and remind everyone to implement changes carefully and thoughtfully, and to remember that such discussions should be mature and should respect the differences that exist amongst us. Remember also that the changes you implement should be for the good of the organization in the long term. So don't be afraid to think holistically and broadly, and always speak in the best interest of our organization and not your organization. In the following days, we will also be dealing with revising ESU's Human Rights and Solidarity Strategy, the most crucial of them all. Remember that our organization is built on the common understanding and respect towards fundamental human rights. But make sure that you do not get derailed in the discussions. Make sure you keep in mind that there's a difference between a country and a students' union, and that our aim should always be to support each other in ensuring that the students' voices remain as relevant as ever across Europe. Lastly, I would now like to ask Gohar and Sebastian to stand up. These two people have literally been the best thing that you as a board could have given this organization over the past year. And I cannot emphasize enough how lucky I am and how grateful I am to be working alongside these two in Brussels. I would now also like to ask the rest of the HEX team to stand up, and the Secretariat. Take a proper look at these people who are currently standing up, and over the next few days, find some time to speak to them and to thank them. Because all of them have not stopped working to make sure that this organization continues to thrive and continues to secure its name amongst the most prominent stakeholders and players at both the European and the international level. I urge you all to not forget all the hard work that these individuals who just stood up are doing amidst all the political discourse that will necessarily and obviously be part of this board meeting, and to always criticize them constructively without forgetting to give them the words of appraisal they truly deserve. I wish you all a very pleasant stay in Malta, and on behalf of the HEX team, we do hope that you find both the agenda of the seminar and the board meeting useful and interesting, and may the odds be ever in our favor to hopefully finish off our very packed board meeting agenda. Thank you.